All right, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're going to transport ourselves back in time to uncover the fascinating, honestly almost entirely forgotten history of what was once a beloved local landmark in Evansville. We're talking about an era when the landscape looked drastically different, and the whole idea of a weekend getaway was about to undergo a massive, revolutionary change.
So, I want you to picture this. Imagine a place that was the absolute epicenter of local culture. A booming, poetry-like destination where literally thousands of people flocked every single weekend. It was the place to be seen, and honestly, a place where countless romances began. Now, imagine that same majestic paradise just vanishing entirely, swallowed up so completely by modern urban sprawl that you probably drive right over it on your daily commute without having a clue it ever existed. It's crazy, right? How does a grand, beloved cultural institution just disappear?
To figure that out, let's look at Section 1, Life Before Easy Travel.
To really wrap our heads around how this disappearance happened, we have to look at the world as it was back then. Picture Evansville in the late 1800s. By today's standards, a very small town. Remember, this is way before the convenience of cars and massive highway systems. Just getting out of the city was a huge luxury. It was an arduous, exhausting task that most people simply couldn't afford or even manage because of a complete lack of adequate transportation. Your whole world, your recreation, your community, it was all pretty much boxed into the immediate city limits. If you wanted an escape, you really didn't have many options.
But that all changes in Section 2, the Railroad Revolution.
The real game changer here, the major catalyst for massive cultural change, was the birth of the local railroad. Back in 1889, the ES&N Railroad was formed, primarily to handle the rapid expansion of people, goods, and trade moving from Evansville out to Newburgh. It traced this really fascinating route, starting at 5th Street, following the old Wabash and Erie Canal, swinging southeast through Wesselman Park and the State Hospital grounds, all the way down to Water Street in Newburgh. Now, for the first 16 years, they used what were called dummy locomotives, which were basically just small steam engines. That is, until 1905, when they made a massive upgrade and fully electrified the railroad for interurban cars.
What's really brilliant about this whole setup is the business strategy behind it. The ES&N was owned by a guy named F.W. Cook, and if you're local, that name might ring a bell from his famous brewery. Cook had already leased property on the east side of town, simply to use as a pasture for his brewery's horses. But he noticed something key. The ES&N Railroad ran right past it. So a light bulb goes off. He realizes that if he builds a beautiful, private pleasure park right along his own rail route, he could basically manufacture demand. He gave people a reason to ride his trains on Saturdays and Sundays, which of course massively boosted weekend rail traffic and his own bottom line. Pretty smart, right?
And that leads us to Section 3, the Golden Age of Groves.
Now, Cook's brilliant business move didn't just happen in a vacuum. It tapped perfectly into a broader American cultural trend of the time. But real quick, we need to define exactly what a grove actually was, because that word is kind of faded from our modern vocabulary. When we talk about groves in this era, we are definitely not talking about wild, unkempt, overgrown forests. A grove was a highly curated, privately owned park. Picture trees of a similar nature, specifically planted and perfectly spaced out in large groups, with absolutely all the messy underbrush cleared away. It was pristine, inviting, and literally designed from the ground up for public recreation. Because travel on that new dummy railroad was suddenly so cheap and quick, these beautiful private parks just started springing up everywhere along the route. Places like Gilbert's Grove, Newburgh's Kubler's Garden, and of course Barnett's Grove practically overnight became the premier regional cultural destinations. People were experiencing this massive awakening of outdoor enthusiasm. You had church groups and whole companies hosting these huge picnics. What we're really looking at here is the foundational precursor to the modern American amusement park. It was literally the birth of organized weekend recreation.
Let's step into Section 4, inside Barnett's Grove.
Yet zoom right into the absolute most popular spot on the map during this golden age, Barnett's Grove, which, fun fact, used to be known as Olympic Park, sat about 5 miles from the city in Knight Township, tucked right between Newburgh Road and Washington Ave. And this brilliantly illustrates the vibe. Historical accounts literally described it by saying it was a lover's paradise to all the sweethearts, its appearance descriptive of places in poetry. I mean, can you even imagine that? A place so stunning and serene that locals talked about it as if it were pulled straight out of a romantic poem? It was this fully immersive experience. Every Saturday and Sunday, thousands upon thousands of locals would pack onto those interurban trains and absolutely flood the Grove. They'd take long strolls through the meticulously cleared woods, play organized games out on the sprawling lawns, and listen to live musical entertainment. But the crowning jewel of Barnett's Grove, the trees. Visitors would eat their picnic lunches under this massive canopy of great poplar trees. Historical accounts noted that these were some of the most beautiful trees ever seen, totally unparalleled anywhere else near Evansville, that created the absolute perfect shade from the brutal summer sun.
But as we move into Section 5, it faded into history.
As we all know, nothing lasts forever. Progress brings change, and ironically, the very thing that created Barnett's Grove, transportation technology, is exactly what killed it. As time went on, society started craving bigger, more personal adventures. We shifted away from the era of interurban trains, which were all about cheap, community-focused trips to local parks, right into the era of automobiles and highways. Cars offered personal freedom. Suddenly, you didn't have to just go where the train tracks told you to go, right? You could travel further abroad to satisfy your own individualized needs. And because of that, the rise of highways slowly but surely made local interurban rail travel practically useless.
Without the train dropping thousands of eager people off at its doorstep every weekend, Barnett's Grove had to fight for its life. The land went through a series of pretty desperate pivots just to survive. First, it transitioned into a roadhouse called the Club de Ville, advertising live music and late-night dancing. When that fizzled out, it briefly operated as a short-lived Bible Institute camp in the mid-1930s. But eventually, the majestic poplar trees just couldn't pay the bills. As its use diminished, this grand land was ultimately sold off and subdivided into much smaller individual residential lots.
The transformation was absolute. Today, if you're driving by the area between Newburgh Road and Washington Ave, you would have absolutely zero idea this grand, poetry-like palace ever existed. The great poplar trees? Gone. The picnic lawns? Gone. The only real reminders of its past are a few invisible railroad right-of-ways, completely swallowed up by a century of expanding urban development. As Evansville's population boomed, the city simply paved right over its own past.
It really makes you pause and look at your own city a little differently, doesn't it? The story of Barnett's Grove isn't just about Evansville. It's really the story of modern America. So I'll leave you with this to think about. What forgotten grand places, what lovers' paradises, and what historic monuments might be completely hidden under the asphalt of your own daily commute? The history's right there under our feet if we only know where to look.